Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. The soft hum of the office air conditioning was the only sound breaking the silence as Sarah stared at her computer screen, the cursor blinking mockingly at the blank document. 3 months had passed since that night. The night everything changed between her and Daniel. 3 months since she'd whispered those words that now haunted her dreams. "We can't let anyone know. Promise me you'll keep quiet." But keeping quiet was proving to be the hardest thing either of them had ever done. Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee cup, her eyes involuntarily drifting to the corner office where Daniel sat hunched over his desk, his dark hair falling across his forehead in that way that made her heart skip. Even from across the room, she could feel the weight of his presence, the invisible thread that seemed to connect them no matter how hard they tried to sever it. The marketing firm where they both worked had always been a second home to Sarah. She'd climbed the ranks from intern to senior account manager over 5 years, building a reputation for her creativity and dedication. Daniel had arrived 8 months ago as the new creative director, bringing with him a quiet intensity and a smile that could light up the entire floor. From their first meeting, there had been something, a spark, a recognition, a dangerous pull that both of them had tried desperately to ignore. Sarah? The voice belonged to Monica, her closest friend and colleague, who appeared at her cubicle with a concerned expression. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah forced a smile, hoping it looked more convincing than it felt. "Just tired, long weekend." Monica studied her for a moment, her intuitive nature picking up on the undercurrents that Sarah had been trying so hard to hide. "You know, you've been saying that a lot lately. Are you sure everything's okay?" Before Sarah could respond, the sound of Daniel's office door opening sent a jolt through her system. She didn't need to look to know he was walking toward them. Her body seemed to have developed a radar for his presence, responding to his nearness with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. "Good morning, ladies." Daniel's voice was warm and professional, but Sarah caught the slight tremor in his tone, the way his eyes lingered on her face for just a second too long. "Sarah, could I see you in my office when you have a moment? I'd like to discuss the Harrison account." The Harrison account. They both knew it was an excuse, a reason to be alone together that wouldn't raise suspicions. Sarah's pulse quickened as she nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. "Of course, I'll be right there." As Daniel walked away, Monica raised an eyebrow. "That's the 3rd time this week he's needed to discuss the Harrison account with you. Are you sure you're not taking on too much?" Sarah's laugh sounded hollow even to her own ears. "It's a complicated campaign. Lots of moving parts." If only you knew, she thought, watching Daniel disappear back into his office. If only you knew how complicated everything has become. 10 minutes later, Sarah knocked softly on Daniel's door, her heart pounding against her ribs. When he called for her to enter, she found him standing by the window, his shoulders tense, his hands clenched at his sides. "Close the door," he said quietly. Not turning around, Sarah hesitated. Closing the door would give them privacy, but it would also make this real again. Make it impossible to pretend that nothing had changed between them. Still, she reached for the handle and turned the lock with a soft click. "Daniel, we talked about this," she whispered, her voice barely audible even in the quiet office. "We agreed." "I know what we agreed," he interrupted, finally turning to face her. The pain in his dark eyes was unmistakable, raw and honest in a way that made her chest tighten. "But I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I can't pretend that what happened between us meant nothing." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. the conversation she'd been dreading and longing for in equal measure. "It's not that it meant nothing," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "It's that it meant everything. That's the problem." The space between them seemed to shrink, though neither of them had moved. Sarah could smell his cologne, that familiar scent that had become synonymous with sleepless nights and dreams she couldn't quite remember upon waking. She could see the way his chest rose and fell with each breath, the slight stubble on his jaw that she remembered feeling against her skin. "Then why are we fighting this?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why are we pretending that we don't feel this connection?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to summon the strength she'd been building for months. "Because you know why. Because of my engagement. Because of David. Because of everything we both stand to lose if this gets out." The mention of David's name hung between them like a physical barrier. David, her fiancé of 2 years, the man she was supposed to marry in 6 months. David, who loved her with a steady, comfortable affection that had once seemed like enough. David, who had no idea that his future wife's heart was being torn apart by feelings she'd never expected to experience. "Do you love him?" Daniel asked, suddenly the question sharp and direct in the quiet room. Sarah's eyes flew open. "Daniel, that's not... Do you love him the way you love me?" The words hung in the air between them, naked and vulnerable. Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling, the defenses she'd built over the past 3 months dissolving under the weight of his honesty. "That's not fair," she whispered, tears threatening to spill over. "You can't ask me that." "I'm asking anyway," Daniel said, taking a step closer. "Because I need to know. I need to know if I'm crazy for feeling like what we have is worth fighting for." Sarah's hands were shaking now, her carefully ordered world tilting on its axis. She thought about David, about the life they'd planned together, the house they'd picked out, the future that seemed so certain just a few months ago. Then she thought about Daniel, about the way he made her feel alive in a way she'd never experienced, about the connection that seemed to transcend logic and reason. "I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't do this to him. I can't do this to myself." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah found herself moving closer to Daniel, drawn by an invisible force that seemed stronger than her will. When he reached out and gently touched her face, she didn't pull away. When he whispered her name like a prayer, she closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. "We said we'd keep quiet," she murmured against his palm. "We promised." "I know," he replied, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. "But I'm tired of being quiet. I'm tired of pretending that this doesn't exist." For a moment they stood frozen in time, balanced on the edge of a decision that would change everything. Sarah could feel the weight of her engagement ring on her finger, the symbol of promises made and a future planned. But she could also feel Daniel's heartbeat under her palm, the warmth of his skin, the way he looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside broke the spell. Sarah stepped back quickly, her professional mask sliding back into place, just as someone knocked on the door. "Mr. Richardson? The clients are here for the 10 o'clock meeting." Daniel cleared his throat, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "Thank you, Jennifer. I'll be right out." As the footsteps retreated, Sarah smoothed her hair and straightened her blouse, trying to compose herself. But when she looked up at Daniel, she saw her own turmoil reflected in his expression. "This isn't over," he said quietly, his voice carrying a promise that made her heart race. "It has to be," she replied, but her words lacked conviction. As Sarah reached for the door handle, Daniel's voice stopped her. "Sarah?" She turned back to him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. "I meant what I said that night. I love you, and I don't think I can stop." The words followed her out of his office and back to her desk, where she sat staring at her computer screen without seeing it. Around her, the office buzzed with normal activity. Phones ringing, conversations about weekend plans, the mundane rhythms of corporate life. But Sarah felt like she was living in a parallel universe, where every breath was a struggle and every heartbeat echoed with Daniel's name. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls, but Sarah found herself unable to focus on anything except the memory of Daniel's touch, the way he'd looked at her, as if she was something precious and fragile. By lunchtime, she was exhausted from the effort of appearing normal, of pretending that her world hadn't been turned upside down by a 5-minute conversation. She was gathering her things to leave for lunch when her phone buzzed with a text message. Her heart stopped when she saw Daniel's name on the screen. "Meet me at the cafe on 5th Street. We need to talk." Sarah stared at the message, her hands trembling. The cafe on 5th Street was where they'd first talked, really talked, about something other than work. It was where she'd learned about his childhood in Oregon, his dreams of writing a novel, his fear of never finding someone who understood him. It was where she'd realized that what she felt for him was more than just attraction. It was a connection that went soul deep. She typed and deleted several responses, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Finally, she sent back a single word. "I can't." But even as she hit send, Sarah knew she was lying to herself. She could, and she would, because the alternative, never seeing him again, never having this conversation, was unthinkable. 20 minutes later, she found herself walking into the small cafe, her heart pounding with each step. Daniel was already there, sitting at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup as if seeking warmth. When he saw her, relief flooded his features. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted as she sat down across from him. "I wasn't sure either," Sarah replied honestly. "But I couldn't stay away." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on them. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, but Sarah felt as if they were the only two people in the world. "I've been thinking about what you said," Daniel began, his voice low and intense. "About keeping quiet, about protecting everyone else. But what about protecting us? What about protecting what we have?" Sarah's chest tightened. "What we have is complicated, Daniel. It's not just about us. Isn't it?" he challenged gently. "Sarah, I've never felt this way about anyone before. Never. And I know you feel it too. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you look at me when you think no one is watching." She couldn't deny it. The connection between them was undeniable. Electric. Something that defied explanation. But acknowledging it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one step forward would change everything. "I'm engaged," she whispered, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. "I'm supposed to be getting married in 6 months. To a man you don't love," Daniel said quietly. "Not the way you love me." The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. Because he was right. What she felt for David was comfortable, safe, predictable. What she felt for Daniel was wild and consuming. The kind of love that songs were written about, and hearts were broken over. "How do you know?" she asked, tears beginning to blur her vision. "How do you know how I feel?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because I see you, Sarah. Really see you. I see the way you light up when you're talking about something you're passionate about. I see the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. I see the way you laugh at your own jokes before you tell them. I see all of you, and I love all of you." The tears were falling freely now, and Sarah didn't try to stop them. "This is impossible," she whispered. "We work together. People will talk. And David? God, what am I going to do about David? I don't know, Daniel admitted, reaching across the table to take her hand. But I know we can't keep pretending this doesn't exist. We can't keep meeting in secret and pretending it's about work. We can't keep torturing ourselves like this. His thumb traced circles on her palm, and Sarah felt her resolve crumbling. I told you to keep quiet, she said, her voice breaking. I told you we couldn't let anyone know. I know, he replied softly. But maybe it's time to stop being quiet. Maybe it's time to be honest about what we feel. Sarah looked around the cafe, at the couples sharing lunch, at the business people discussing deals, at the normal world that suddenly seemed so far away from her reality. And then what? What happens when everyone finds out? When David finds out? When our careers are destroyed because we couldn't keep our feelings professional? I don't know, Daniel said again, his honesty both refreshing and terrifying. But I know that living this lie is destroying us both. I see it in your eyes every day, Sarah. You're exhausted from pretending. We both are. She knew he was right. The past 3 months had been a special kind of torture, trying to maintain professionalism while her heart was breaking a little more each day. Every interaction with Daniel was charged with electricity. Every glance across the office was filled with longing. Every moment they spent apart felt like a small death. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely audible above the cafe's ambient noise. So am I, Daniel said, squeezing her hand. But I'm more scared of losing you without ever really having you. I'm more scared of wondering what if, for the rest of my life. They sat in silence for a long moment, hands intertwined across the table, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sarah spoke. That night, she said softly, referring to the evening 3 months ago when everything had changed. I keep thinking about that night. Daniel's eyes darkened with memory. So do I every night. It had been a company retreat, an overnight team-building exercise at a mountain resort. Sarah had been engaged to David for over a year by then, comfortable in her planned future. Daniel had been the new creative director, still finding his footing in the company dynamics. They'd been assigned to the same project team, working late into the evening on a presentation for the next day. The resort had been beautiful. Rustic cabins nestled among tall pines, a fire pit where employees gathered for drinks and conversation. Sarah had been tired, stressed about the presentation, missing David who was traveling for work. Daniel had been kind, offering to help with her part of the project, staying up late to perfect the details. They'd been alone in the conference room, working by lamplight, when Sarah had finally broken down. The pressure of wedding planning, the demands of her job, the feeling that she was living someone else's life. It had all come pouring out in a torrent of tears and confessions. Daniel had held her while she cried, his strong arms offering comfort that she hadn't realized she'd been craving. When she'd looked up at him, seen the tenderness in his eyes, something had shifted between them. The air had become charged with possibility, with a connection that neither of them had expected. I shouldn't have kissed you that night, Sarah said now, her voice filled with regret and longing in equal measure. I kissed you first, Daniel reminded her gently, and I don't regret it. I regret that you felt like you had to make me promise to keep quiet. I regret that you felt like you had to choose between your honor and your heart. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the feel of his lips against hers, the way the world had seemed to stop spinning for those few perfect moments. It had been a kiss filled with 3 months of building tension, of stolen glances and professional conversations that carried deeper meaning. It had been a kiss that had changed everything and nothing all at once. We stopped, she whispered. We stopped before it went too far. But we didn't want to stop, Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. We stopped because you were afraid. Because you were thinking about everyone else except yourself. I was thinking about doing the right thing, Sarah protested, though her words lacked conviction. Were you? Daniel challenged gently. Or were you thinking about what other people would consider the right thing? Sarah, you're not happy. You haven't been happy for months. I can see it in your eyes every day. He was right. And they both knew it. Sarah had been going through the motions of her life, planning a wedding she wasn't excited about, living in a relationship that felt more like a comfortable friendship than a passionate love affair. She'd been sleepwalking through her days, until Daniel had arrived and awakened something in her that she'd forgotten existed. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to hurt David. I don't know how to face the consequences of choosing myself for once. You don't have to do it alone, Daniel said, his thumb still tracing gentle patterns on her hand. We can figure it out together. We can take it one step at a time. Sarah looked at him, this man who had turned her carefully ordered world upside down, who had made her feel things she'd never thought possible. His dark eyes were filled with love and hope, and a vulnerability that made her heart ache. If I do this, she said slowly, if I choose you, choose us ... There's no going back. Once I break my engagement, once everyone at work finds out, everything changes. I know, Daniel said seriously. And I know I'm asking you to give up a lot. I know I'm asking you to risk everything. But Sarah, I love you. I love you in a way that I didn't know was possible. And I think you love me too. The words hung between them, a declaration and a question rolled into one. Sarah felt her heart racing, her palms sweating, every nerve in her body alive, with possibility and terror. I do, she whispered, the admission feeling like jumping off a cliff. I love you so much it scares me. I love you so much that I've been lying to myself for months, trying to convince myself that what I feel for David is enough. Daniel's face transformed, relief and joy and something deeper flooding his features. Then let's stop lying, he said, softly. Let's stop pretending. Let's stop being quiet about what we feel. Sarah felt something shift inside her. A wall crumbling, a door opening. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe fully. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. Okay, but we do this right. I need to talk to David first. I need to be honest with him before we... Before we what? Daniel asked, his eyes searching her face. Before we stop keeping quiet, Sarah said, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the gravity of the situation. Before we stop pretending that this doesn't exist. Daniel's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. Are you sure? You sure you're ready for this? Sarah thought about the past 3 months, about the sleepless nights and the constant ache in her chest, about the way she'd been living as a shadow of herself. She thought about David, about the conversation she would have to have with him, about the wedding that would have to be cancelled. She thought about their co-workers, about the gossip and the complications and the professional ramifications. But then she looked at Daniel, at the love in his eyes, at the way he made her feel alive and whole and herself. She thought about the possibility of a future where she didn't have to hide her feelings, where she could love freely and honestly, where she could be with someone who truly saw her. I'm terrified, she admitted. But yes, I'm sure. I'm tired of being quiet. I'm tired of pretending that I don't love you with everything I have. Daniel's hand tightened around hers. So what do we do now? Sarah took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to take the biggest leap of her life. Now we stop running from this. Now we fight for what we have. Now we ... She was interrupted by the vibration of her phone. A text message from David. Can't wait to see you tonight. Made reservations. At that new Italian place you wanted to try. Love you. The message felt like a splash of cold water, a reminder of the reality waiting for her outside this cafe, outside this moment of possibility. Sarah's chest tightened as she showed Daniel the message. He's a good man, she said quietly. He doesn't deserve this. No, Daniel agreed, his voice gentle but firm. He doesn't deserve to be married to someone who's in love with someone else. He deserves to be with someone who loves him completely, the way he loves you. Sarah nodded, knowing he was right, but still feeling the weight of what she was about to do. I'll talk to him tonight. I'll tell him everything. LL. You'll what? Daniel asked when she trailed off. I'll end my engagement, Sarah said, the words feeling both liberating and terrifying. I'll tell him that I can't marry him, that I'm not the person he thinks I am. And then ... then? Daniel prompted softly. Sarah looked at him. This man, who had changed everything simply by existing, simply by seeing her in a way no one else ever had. And then we'll see what happens when we stop keeping quiet. We'll see if what we have is strong enough to survive in the real world. Daniel nodded, understanding the enormity of what she was proposing. It won't be easy, he said. People will talk. There might be consequences at work. Your friends, your family. I know, Sarah said, feeling more certain with each word. But I also know that I can't live the rest of my life wondering what if. I can't marry David knowing that I'm in love with you. I can't keep pretending that this connection between us is something I can ignore. They sat in silence for a moment, both absorbing the magnitude of the decision they'd just made. Then Daniel spoke, his voice soft but determined. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Whatever the consequences, whatever the challenges, we'll figure it out. Because what we have is worth fighting for. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, of hope, of a future that suddenly seemed possible. I love you, she said, the words feeling like a prayer and a promise. I love you, and I'm tired of being quiet about it. I love you too, Daniel replied, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. And I promise you, we'll never have to be quiet about it again. As they sat there in the busy cafe, hands intertwined, Sarah felt like she was standing at the beginning of a new life. There would be difficult conversations ahead, painful decisions, professional complications, and personal challenges. But for the first time in months, she felt like herself again. Not the version of herself that everyone else expected her to be, but the woman she truly was. The woman who had fallen in love with Daniel Richardson, who had tried to keep quiet about it, but who could no longer deny the truth of her heart. They couldn't stop what they felt for each other. They had tried, had fought it, had promised to keep quiet. That love, real love, wasn't something that could be silenced or hidden or denied forever. And Sarah was finally ready to stop trying. As they walked back to the office together, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning. The real test would come tonight, when she had to face David and tell him the truth. The real challenge would be tomorrow, when they returned to work as colleagues, who were no longer pretending not to love each other. But for the first time in months, Sarah felt hope. She felt like she was finally choosing herself, finally choosing love over duty, finally choosing the life she wanted over the life she was expected to want. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Because sometimes the most important promises are the ones you break in order to keep the ones that matter most. And sometimes the most important words are the ones you refuse to keep quiet anymore. Sarah squeezed Daniel's hand as they entered the office building, ready to face whatever consequences their love would bring. Because love this real, this deep, this transformative, wasn't meant to be whispered in secret, that it was meant to be proclaimed, protected, and celebrated. We're finally ready to stop keeping quiet about it.